Hello everyone, welcome to the NetIQ Learn. Today we are focusing on the topic of Introduction to Information Security, and this is the first part of the introductory series which consists of two parts. These resources belongs to Mr. Amila Senarathne with few modifications done by myself as well, and he is a well-experienced lecturer at SLIIT Sri Lanka. These resources are using for educational purposes only. The objective is to discuss on what are the definition of computer and information security, describe key security requirements of computing systems, as well as brief intro on different types of threats and attacks on computer systems. This definition is introduced by the NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, Computer Security Handbook published in 1995. I'll put a link to that publication in the description box down below. It emphasizes what should be the key objective of computer security: confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which we will discuss in detail in the next few slides in this video. Nevertheless, here it includes the protection of all the components of a computer system, including hardware, software, firmware, information, data, and telecommunication. So this is the big picture. And on the other hand, here information security, in short InfoSec, is focusing on the security of the information and the information system, which is a subset of computer security. Again, the main objective need to be fulfilled here as well, the CIA. Unauthorized individuals should not access, use, disclose, disrupt, modify or destruct the information or else information systems. So, as I earlier mentioned that confidentiality, integrity and availability are the key objective of computer security as defined by the NIST. It's called the CIA triad. The whole security in computing is based on achieving those three objectives. Now let's discuss each one of the CIA triad in detail. The first one is confidentiality, which implies by the letter C. This includes two concepts: the confidentiality of data and privacy. The confidential data to someone, some party or some organization should not be disclosed to a third party without the consent of the legitimate owner of that data. And privacy means that the owner of the information or data should have full control over what information related to them can be collected by some other party and by whom and to whom would that collected information may be shared. Most of the time you see that on the websites or software that you use, they have something called privacy policy of the data or information that they collected and to whom they may be shared that information. So you have control over the information you agree to share with them. Now some party is collecting, using or disclose the data or information in such an unauthorized manner, that means the violation of confidentiality occurs. Integrity. What does it mean by that? It means that only the authorized party can modify or destruct the information that they have, not any other. It also has two concepts: integrity of data and the integrity of the system. For instance, let's say person A is sending a file full of secret information to person B, but in the middle there is an unauthorized person called C. Now this C is interrupting the communication between A and B and grab that file, modify it, transfer it back to person B. But now the problem is that initially either A or B do not know what the file that the file has been modified by an unauthorized person in the middle of the communication, and when they realize it has been modified, then it means the loss of integrity of the communication channel that they use, as well as the information sent by the using that channel. Availability means that the system works as intended and service always should be available to the authorized users. The best example to explain this is by considering a denial of service, in short DOS attack. During a simple DOS attack, the unauthorized party or simply the attacker sends the continuous service request to the server and make the server busy. When the server is busy sending the unnecessary reply to those requests which are sent by the attacker, then the authorized users will not be able to use the service supplied by the system. and they have to wait in a long queue of requests. In that way, the service is disrupted for the authorized parties to access or use the information and lose the availability. Here are two more additional objectives of computer security: authenticity and accountability. Authenticity is like your personal identification document. By using it, you can prove that you are the person that you claim to be. Moreover, it can verify that the system receives data from a trusted source. This is a part of achieving the integrity of the sent data. No intermediate person cannot pretend to be the authenticator sender of data. And accountability. It enables the receiver of the data to trace back and find out is that the legitimate sender who sent the information to the receiver or third-party person. As described in the RFC 2828 model of information security glossary, there are few components of it. The first one is system resources or system assets that need to be protected, including hardware, software, data, and communication and network equipment. Another one is the vulnerability of systems resources. Vulnerability is a weakness of the system design, implementation, operation and management that could be exposed to violate the system security policy. We can consider by the way of exploring a vulnerability. If an individual was able to corrupt a system resource, then it implies a violation of integrity. If a resource is leaky, it means a violation of confidentiality. And finally, if the resource is unavailable to use the legitimate users, then it is a violation of availability. And that's how the weakness of a system can affect its security. The third one is the threat. The threat is a possible danger that might exploit the system flaw. Vulnerability is a weakness of the system, and here the threat is the possible danger of using that weakness to gain access or harm the computing system. And the attack can be explained as the threat in action. Someone identifies a flaw in a system that can be possible danger to the system, that is a threat, and finally that threat becomes a reality, that is the attack. Nevertheless, there are few categories of attacks. An attack can be categorized by the way it affects the system as active attack and passive attack. An active attack is directly and negatively affects the system, while a passive attack uses the weak computing system but does not affect the system negatively. Secondly, by the origin of the attack, inside attack and outside attack. As the name implies, inside attack is carried out by an insider of the company, while an outside attack is carried out by an unauthorized user from outside the company premises. If we consider a company context, inside attacks are indeed the most harmful type of attacks, as the employees of a company have full or partial access to the company's computer system, and it can be carried out intentionally or unintentionally. The adversary is the person who carried out an attack. The entity is also known as threat agent, or most commonly an attacker. As the name implies, countermeasures is a measure taken to address an attack. It can be any of the following: to prevent an attack from being successful, to detect the attack if the attack is successful, and to recover from the damage due to attack. And finally, a risk is the expected loss due to a particular attack. For instance, let's take a system that allows weak password without using a proper password acceptance policy. So the weakness or flaw or the vulnerability is with the password, and an attacker can exploit that weakness to break into the system. And as the result, the resource of the system is at risk for illegal access, modification, or even critically damaged by the threat agent. Simply, exploit is a piece of software or the sequence of commands which attacker use to gain unauthorized access, modification, or destruction to a computer system by using a bug of the system. Vulnerability assessment is a method used by a particular organization to define, identify, classify, and prioritize the vulnerabilities of their system and provide appropriate suggestions to the company to minimize the risk of being attacked to their computing systems. Penetration testing, open testing, or ethical hacking is the approach of testing the computing system for possible vulnerabilities. In this practice, an employee of this organization is acting as a real attacker, but with the full permission of the organization, and try to gain access to the computing system of the organization. It can be done on a real system or in a virtual environment set by the company, and finally reporting back the findings to the company. Here we can list down major goals of pen testing. Identify weak spot or vulnerabilities in a company's security posture. We can measure if the company's security policy is sufficient to protect against an attack. We can also test the awareness of the staff on security issues and determine whether or how the company would be subject to security disasters. As I earlier mentioned, passive attacks are intended to monitor the data transmission without negatively impact the system resources. It is because the data is not altered during a passive attack. This type of attack is hard to detect. So an organization should use attack prevention measures, not detection measures, to handle the situation. Moreover, there are two basic types of passive attacks. Passive attacks can view the entire data or message if the data did not encrypt. Then it leads to a violation of confidentiality. In the case of data is encrypted, then an attacker analyzes the traffic of the data. On the other hand, active attacks will alter the system resources, and it is negatively affecting the system. In this case, active attacks are difficult to prevent but easy to detect. There are four types of active attacks. In a replay attack, the attacker captures and retransmits data packets to make unauthorized effect on the computing system. In a masquerade attack, an attacker pretends to be another entity such as a legitimate user and grab the data. As the name implies, during the data modification attack, it alters some portion of legitimate data, delay the data, or reorder the data to make unauthorized effect to the system. And the fourth type is DOS or denial of service, which prevent legitimate user to use the computing systems. Inside attack is carried out by an entity who is originated from the inside network, such as an employee of the organization, and could happen intentionally or unintentionally. For instance, let's say an employee found a flash drive on his/her work desk and want to check out what is inside it. Then that employee might plug it into the computer of the organization, which connects to the company's internal network, and that could steal the confidential data of the company to a remote server of the attacker or destroy the equipment of the company. That's because that flash drive was maliciously created by the attacker, and the employee did not aware of the computer security best practices of that organization. In that way, inside attacks has the potential to cause greater damage to the system of the organization than the external or outside attack. Outside or external attacks are carried out by an unauthorized user who reside outside the organization's network. A good example of this is a DOS or DDoS, distributed DOS attack. This is the computer security model that we discussed during the past few minutes. This explains how all the entities connect each other. Let's try to explain it a little bit by starting from the entity owner. The owner has the value of the company's assets, and threat agent or attacker wish to gain access and cause damage to. The owner sees the vulnerability of the system that could be a risk to the company's assets and wish to minimize it by imposing the necessary countermeasures. On the other hand, attackers give rise to threats that could exploit vulnerabilities to leading a risk of the company's assets. And that's how those two roles of this model show their interest regarding the assets of a company. Now with that, we can conclude today's session on Introduction to Information Security, the first part. And we will meet next Monday with part 2 of this session. Please do support me by subscribing to NetIQ Learn and sharing the content. Thank you and have a great day.